Hello and welcome to today's BITRIX24 webinar, Better Business Processes. Thank you very much for joining today. Okay, so we'll just go through an introduction first of all. So I'm Sam Connor, Sales Manager here at Interface, and we're based in the UK, the US and Hong Kong. And what we do is we offer a full range of services to assist you with BITRIX24. So starting off with pre-sale support to help you to evaluate your requirements. We can then implement BITRIX24 for your specific needs, so it's designed exactly how you need it to work. For the self-hosted option, we can provide our hosting services for you, and we provide ongoing dedicated support and bespoke training to ensure you get the most value possible out of BITRIX24. Okay, so actually if you are coming to today's webinar to actually get more of a flavour as to what BITRIX24 actually is, let's just go through a high level of what BITRIX24 encompasses. Okay, so BITRIX24 is a collaboration suite of well in excess now of 40 different tools that you can use to manage your business. There are over 12 million customers around the world that use the BITRIX24 system, and it's available in two different editions. So we have the BITRIX24 Cloud and we have the BITRIX24 Self-Hosted. It's also called the On-Premise. Essentially, it's a private cloud solution of BITRIX24. In terms of pricing, so prices start from approximately $49 per month for a cloud-based system. And if you're interested in the self-hosted, that starts on the Business 50, which is $3,590 for the first 12 months. Then in year 2 and ongoing annually, you will pay a renewal fee for the self-hosted of approximately 25% of the original license fee. Okay, so today's webinar is Better Business Processes. So what we'll be looking at is essentially how we can design and build out our processes inside the BITRIX24 system. So BITRIX24 essentially has many different areas where we can essentially build workflows. There isn't really just one area in BITRIX24 where you would manage all of your processes in one system. So it has a really advanced business process tool. So we'll be looking at the different options in today's webinar. But essentially, just to understand what a business process actually is, first of all, a business process is a flow of information defined by a route or a scheme. And as I say there, BITRIX has many different types of business processes. So first of all, we have a sequential business process. And a sequential business process, essentially, a key element is how it has a start point and an end point. And then you run a workflow from the start to the end. So if I just open up our BITRIX24 system here, this is a sequential business process. So we have a start point here. We then go down to the end point here. And in between, we have our workflow. So this here is a leave approval process. So we are requesting annual leave, and then we're going through a workflow through an approval process. And that has the start and endpoints. So that's a sequential business process. We also have state-driven business processes. So the key difference here is a state-driven process does not have a start or an endpoint. Essentially, it has a series of statuses, and on each status, it can then trigger and run a group of processes. So if we go back into our BITRIX, we can see here, this is a state-driven business process. Quite commonly, you will see these on documents, for example. So you could update the status of the documents, which will then run a process here, such as sending for approval or through to the publishing stage there. So you can set up those different processes on the system. We then have really popular is CRM automations. So today's webinar, we're not going to be focusing solely on the CRM. We do have a webinar where we solely look at the CRM system in its entirety, so you can join us for that webinar. But if we go into our BITRIX system, inside the CRM here where we've got leads and deals as an example, inside here, if we go into our automation center, what we can do is on each stage of the sales process here, we could set up automated actions. So that, for example, could be setting up campaigns that we send out to the clients during different stages of the workflow. It could be creating automated actions for the sales rep, such as call actions to call the client, as another example. So you can set up automations in leads and deals, also on SPAs, which we'll take a look at. So this really allows you to streamline your sales processes inside the BITRIX CRM system. We then also have RPAs and SPAs. So first of all, let's take a look at an RPA. So RPA is essentially robotic process automation. So in these examples, for example, you could create an RPA for the different types of HR processes that you run. So for example, here we have an expenses RPA. So you can create the stages here, such as submitting the expense, going through to a supervisor approval. And again, that's using automations in the background to create and run that workflow. And then we mentioned around our SPA feature. So an SPA, essentially that is a smart process automation tool. And this is encompassed inside the CRM system. Now you need to have at least a professional cloud license of BITRIX to access this. So if you're on a basic or a standard cloud, you won't be able to see this feature. But we can help you to upgrade, because this is a really powerful feature in the system. So if I search here, smart process automation, you'll see the item come up. And essentially inside an SPA, it will allow you to create your very own entities inside the CRM system. So essentially, it allows you to completely build out the CRM to your specific use case. So for example, in our CRM here, we have a project entity. So once the deal has been completed, we're then creating here a project record inside the CRM system. And this is then connected to the deal, to the contacts here. So we can then see all of the tasks associated to the project and see all of the information about the project inside the system. So the SPA feature is a really powerful way to completely customize your CRM system. And then the last feature is that we also have smart scripts. Okay, so again, quite a new feature available on all self-hosted and on your cloud systems. A smart process smart script here is available. So inside here where you've got scripts, you can then go into smart scripts. And essentially a smart script allows you to create a flow of automations. So whether that's sending out emails, creating tasks, but you can then run that on a defined either group of people, such as contacts. It could be on a specific segment of your leads or deals. So you choose who is going to be sent this trigger of an automation. So I can then select from here, and then I could select the script from here and then run that script in the system. So you have a lot of control with scripts to actually decide who the audience is of that particular workflow. Okay, so that is a look at the different types of business processes. And as you can see, there isn't one area. You're not going to find a module inside BITRIX called business processes where all of those processes are run. Business processes, they are built into a lot of the framework of BITRIX. So whichever module you're going in, you're going to see a lot of that business process functionality available inside the BITRIX system. So if we have a look now at where we can run those business processes, you're going to see a lot of different areas of the system where we can run those processes. So as I've just mentioned there, running smart scripts, we can do that directly inside the CRM system. And that brings us on nicely to look at automations. So automations on stages, you can run these in leads and on deals. So if I go into one of our leads, for example, what I can do inside here is I can update the stage of the lead, and it will then update the processes inside the system. So you can then trigger email communications to the client, create tasks internally for your customers and sales reps. Okay. If we go back to the feed area, a lot of the HR workflows are triggered from the feed section. So if we click into the MAR here and open up the workflow, we can then see all of the workflows we have access to. So that can be customized to your specific needs and requirements. So you might want to show additional workflows here that you've customized. You can show those here. So I could select, say, request leave, and that opens up the form that I can then start to fill in. Okay, if we go into the drive area, then inside the drive, if we go to the company drive space here, what we can do, if we go to our settings here, you want to go into configure business processes first of all. Make sure this button is ticked for the business processes. And then on here, what we can then do is we could run business processes on those documents. So it could be an approval document, for example, or notifying a user in the system. So you can set up lots of different types of business processes on documents. And again, if you want this business process tool here, you would need at least the professional cloud edition. Okay, processes can also be run on tasks. So you're starting to see here, we're going from the CRM to the feed to the drive to tasks and projects. These processes, they're built into all of the different key areas of BITRIX24. So inside tasks, where we've got our deadlines here, I can click in the automation button. And again, on task statuses, we could set up automations. And this is a really nice way to set up your project. So if we go into one of our projects, for example, a really good way to see how automations works on tasks is here. So for example, we may set up a mixture of triggers and automations. So for example, we've got a trigger here which is called overdue. So as soon as a task passes its deadline and it's not completed, we can then move the status of that task to this stage here. So it may need to then go for an approval by the manager to actually decide is this task actually still viable inside the project. So we could automatically move it to that stage. Then we're going to change who is responsible for that task. It's going to go to that senior manager who now has to do an approval on that task. And then we can also notify additional users about this task now being overdue. So that's a really good way of how we could use a mixture of triggers which can update the status automatically, and then the automations below which will then be actioned once we hit that status. Okay, and if we go into a project, you can see all of your projects that are housed inside the system here. And another feature within our project itself, so this is where we can manage all of our projects, we have lists. And so lists are essentially ways where we can store tables of information about that project. So here, for example, we've got all of the expenses associated with the project. And inside here, what we can do is we can run business processes. So it could be we might want to run an approval process on an expense, for example. So I can run that, and it then goes to the manager to approve or reject inside the system. Okay, and one last thing to point out, we looked at earlier on how we can create smart processes inside the system. So that's where we can create our own entities. Then inside here as well, obviously we've got stages. So if we go into our Kanban view, you can see the stages that we're progressing the project through. Again, inside an SPA, you can design and build out your smart process automation rules. So you might want to then trigger either triggers to update the status here of the project, and then we've got automated actions that are going to then be sent either to the client or the internal project manager to complete. So you can run those automations directly inside your created entities inside BITRIX. Okay, so that is a look at the standard ways we can run business processes. With the self-hosted system, because it is the most advanced edition of BITRIX, we do have some additional areas where you can run processes. So for example, inside the user's profile page, we could trigger a workflow directly inside the user's profile. So maybe if we update some information in our profile page here, that could then trigger a workflow in the back end of the BITRIX system. Okay, so that is a look there at some of the ways we can run our business processes. And of course, as you've seen there, the key area to point out is They are not housed within a certain area of BITRIX. They are built into almost all modules, key modules of BITRIX, from the CRM, tasks and projects, the drive area, directly inside the project work group. So you can see how critical those can be to running all of your processes through BITRIX. And we have had a question come in around, again, I think we have answered this, but just to point out, if you are looking to use the Business Process Designer tool, smart process automations, you need to have at least a professional cloud license. So if you are on a free, a free basic or a standard cloud, you're not going to have access to these features. And these features really start to give you a lot more value out of the BITRIX24 system. So it's well worth thinking about upgrading to have access to these pieces of functionality. And if you are interested in that and want to have a conversation with our team here, you can contact us, sales@interface.com, and one of our team will be happy to discuss any questions with you. Okay, so another question here, where do any approvals go that are on a workflow? So again, approvals, we'll go through an example in a short while, but if we go into on the left-hand side menu here, you can see the Automation Center. If you click in the Automation Center, this will then show you all of the workflows, essentially where there's something you've got to action, okay? So whether it's here where we've got to approve an expense, or further down here where we've got to approve or reject a holiday request. Any type of approval that is then directed to you through a workflow, you'll see here in the Automation section. Okay, so that is a look there at the questions we've had so far. If you do have any other questions, you can add them into the comment box on YouTube, or you can, as I say, contact sales@interface.com, and one of our team will be happy to discuss those questions with you on a call. Okay, so let's now take a look at how we can create our own business processes inside the system. So we've seen already how we can create a smart process automation tool, but let's actually deep dive into, let's go into the deal section of our CRM system. And inside here, what we can do is we want to create a new business process that's going to look at the different stages that we're progressing the deal through. So let's go into our settings area. Let's go into CRM settings. So I'm going to show you here where we can get to the business process designer tool. So inside here, you go to automations, and then you want to click on business processes. Okay, so this will now open up essentially all the entities in the CRM system. And what's nice with this, it includes all of those smart process automations that we've set up. So you can see any type of entity you then create using smart process automation, you can then build out really intuitive workflows using the business process designer tool. So we're going to go to add a template. And what we're going to be doing here is looking at the status changes on deals. And then we're going to be triggering a flow of action. So let's call this deal status change 2024. And then we can choose when this business process is run. So we might want to do it just when the deal is added. So we can add it when added. We might want to look when any changes are made to the deal. Or if we just untick, then what we can do is manually run this process. So we can go into the deal and manually run this when changed. But let's want to do this when anything changes on the deal. So let's now save that. And as you can see here, we have a start and an end point. So hopefully you can remember this is a sequential business process because we have that start and end point. So now when this is checking through the status of the deals, it's going to run and check those conditions. So what we'll do first of all is let's go into our editor tool here. So this is what we call our variable section. So you can see all the different variables that you have inside the system here. And you can, if it may look quite complex, so you can, hide different areas, or you can just show your activity section. So we're going to be looking at 3 different stages of the deal. So let's now open up our element fields, and I want to look at the stages of the deal. So we're going to check that as a stage. And the first one we're going to check is, let's look at when we're submitting to the client. So we're going to be submitting the quote to the client. Okay, so we've got that there, and we're going to be equal to submitting there. So let's now update that. So that's looking at that specific stage in the deal, and we're just going to then configure this for the other two stages that we want to check as we're running the business process here. Okay, so let's now do it when we're calling the customer back. And then the final one is once the deal has been secured. Now there may be certain workflows that you want to set up in the system and you're not sure how to do this. So we can help with this. So if you've got certain workflows you're wanting to set up, our team at InterTrace can either build these out for you, or we can support you and guide you. So we can essentially train you how to build out your workflow. So let's say once we've submitted the quote here, we want to run a credit check. So that's going to perform a task inside the system. When we get to, let's say, actually here, we'll add in the task for the team. So approve or refuse that credit check. We're then calling the client back. So let's add the phone call task into the system here once we move to that stage. And once the deal is won, let's notify the sales manager, and also let's thank the customer for their order. So in this workflow here, we're looking at those three specific stages. And on each of those stages, we're then going to be running certain actions once we hit that stage. And it's going to constantly check and update as we're running that in the system. So this is using the Business Process Designer tool. Okay, and like I say, it may look quite complex, but our team here at InterTrace can really help to get the workflows that you want set up accurately set up inside BITRIX, so it can save you a huge amount of time. Okay, but as I say, another way of setting up automations is inside our automations engine inside BITRIX. So let's now go into our project SPA that we've set up previously. And inside here, what we may want to do if we go into our automations area is we want to create a task once the project moves to task in progress. So I can open up our automation section, and I'm going to move this to when the stage hits task in progress, and I want to create a task inside the system. So we're going to run this, let's say I'm going to run this in 1 hour's time after the stage is moved. And let's say on here, okay, so we're going to say assigning documents to the project. Okay, so there we go. We've got our task. We're assigning it to the responsible person in the project. And let's also put a deadline on this. So we're going to say you've got 1 day from when the task is triggered and created to have that task finished. So let's now update the task name. And then that's saved inside the system. So now if we go into one of our projects, and what we'll do is let's now progress this task through the system. So we want to move it to the task in progress stage. And now we'll see it's going to trigger the creation of the task inside the system. And that will then go to the responsible person on the project. So that's another way we can run processes. It's using automation rules inside the system. Okay, so we've seen there how we can, first of all, where we can run business processes in lots of different modules. We've also looked at actually how we can create processes using the Business Process Designer tool and automation rules. But in terms of triggering business processes, this is how essentially we can run a process in the system. So on the cloud system, you can run processes on creation. So such as when we create a deal, we saw how in the Business Process Designer tool, we could tick the box when created. We might also want to do it on updating as we designed our workflow when the deal gets updated. You can also manually run workflows, as we saw when we opened up our leave approval workflow. So you can manually open up forms and then trigger a workflow inside the feed, in the CRM, on documents. Or we could also use webhooks. So a webhook could automatically trigger a workflow as well. And that's something that could be really useful if you maybe want to trigger something maybe with external processes. And with the self-hosted system, we could then connect the BITRIX system with another solution and then trigger processes between those platforms. So we can create very advanced trigger processes on the self-hosted system. And with the self-hosted system, what we also have access to is the control panel. This is essentially the back end of the BITRIX24 system. And inside here, if we go into our services area, you can see we have mailboxes. And with mailboxes, we can create rules on those mailboxes. So for example, we could create a rule so when an email comes to us into a specific mailbox, we could automatically create a support ticket inside the system. Okay, so that's a really good way of showing how the advancements that you have with the self-hosted solution. Okay, so let's look at a few live examples now of workflows inside this system. And what we'll do is we'll start off inside the deals area of BITRIX24. So we can see here where we've got all of our deals in the system. We've got a TechCo 2024 digital marketing project. And what we want to do, we're about to close the order with this customer. So now we want to essentially create the project to assign the tasks and bring specific groups of people together and create the project record inside the system. So let's now close this deal and mark it as won. So now the TechCo 2024 digital marketing project is a won deal. And then what we can do is we can then, through our business processes, we then create automated actions. So if I just go into our automation section, I'm just going to show you the back end of this first of all. When the deal is won here, we're automatically creating a project record using our automation rules. Okay, so now if we go into our project area of the system, we can now see that the TechCo 2024 marketing project has now been created as a project record inside our project area. And it's at the first stage of the system, and it's created all of the tasks associated with the project. So rather than having to manually create that project record, feed in the customer's details and information, we can use that automation rule to streamline that process and feed the information into the BITRIX24 project management area of BITRIX. And what's really nice with this is if we go into the contact record, I can then see all of those projects. They're connected back inside the customer's record. So it rolls up all of the information back to the customer's record inside the system. So that's a really nice way of using our automation rules. Let's have a look at another workflow, such as a leave approval request. So inside here, what we can do is I'm going to submit for some holiday leave inside the system. So this opens up a form that I need to complete. So let's add all of the details for my request. And this form here, you can customize this form. So you can see what we've got as mandatory fields. That can be customized. You might want to add additional fields there or change, actually maybe shrink that form, completely customizable to your process. And now we're going to send that for approval. So that's now going to go to my manager to approve or reject inside the system. And so if we go back into our automation area, this is, as somebody asked the question, where do all of those approvals go to? You can see here now, inside here, that holiday request looking from the 13th to the 14th of February. I now need to approve or reject that in the system. So let's go through and approve that. And now if you go into the absence chart, so inside the time and reports area, we've got the absence chart feature. That holiday request is now added inside the system here. So that's a really nice workflow that you can do through BITRIX. What we also have inside the system as well is our absence management module. So actually, if you wanted to actually have leave entitlements for your users, then what we can do with the self-hosted system, we have a plugin feature that enables you to add leave entitlements for all of your staff. So essentially, you can add an entitlement for every user, and then as they have their holiday requests approved, that will reduce their remaining balance inside the system. Okay, and then within here as well, you can then also see what's been approved, any pending holiday leaves, and you can cancel those through your profile. So there's quite a lot of additional functionality that we have with our plugin solution for the absence management tool. Okay, just to now go through some of the differences between the cloud and the self-hosted. So we've already mentioned, obviously, for the cloud system, you really do need at least a professional cloud license to access the business process designer tool and smart process automation. But you can run processes then in a lot of areas of BITRIX, from documents, HR, CRM, and lists. You can also create leads from web forms and other processes that are triggered inside the CRM. With the self-hosted though, essentially we could run a process on any entity in the system or even on the user's profile. And then we can also create additional actions such as on mailboxes. So that creates a ticket inside the help desk system. So you can extend the functionality on the self-hosted to create more advanced triggers and workflows. Okay, so in summary today, we've seen how business processes can be run on lots of areas of BITRIX24. This isn't a module in itself. Business processes are built into the framework of BITRIX. It's a core area and aspect for you to run all of your information and approvals through the system. We have a simple drag and drop workflow creator tool, so you can design really intuitive workflows. And those workflows can then be triggered in different ways, whether it's manually, automatically, but also by email or on an API call as well. Okay, here are a selection of our up and coming webinars as well. So we're here every other Tuesday at 10 AM Eastern time, and you can register for those webinars at interface.com/webinars. And you can also contact us, sales@interface.com, and one of our team will be happy to answer any questions or discuss anything to do with BITRIX24 with you and your colleagues. Okay, but thank you very much for your time today. I look forward to seeing you all on our up and coming webinars.